Okay, looks like we are running. Let us hit our little magic light bulb clickety clack. Welcome to Evolution Hour, August, on time of stress and doom. And again, Tortugan WordPress, lots of freebie stuff there, free sharing. 85 degrees here in my den at 12:30 in the morning. Isn't that exciting? Although, fortunately, Spokane has relatively low humidity. To give you a guesstimation, this would feel probably less sweltery than 70 degrees if you were in Chicago. So, because of the high humidity there. So, we proceed as we can. As usual, we are continuing to plow down through Titans, the cute little dinosaur book. They're into more soft tissue crap. Part 2 is going to be a thing about spider webs from Philip Bell, who's kind of a recurring oddball character in the creationist literature. Not a huge number of postings, but he pops up recurrently. And an exciting brand new paper, which no doubt some creationists are going to be playing off of at some stage. So we thought we would bring it up because it's open access, so might as well add that into the bunch as well. And Scott Gillis, who is the CMI guy, who was the reason why I have the Sarfatian Tay book, because it was bought at this little speech that he was giving in Idaho. Well, this month there, he's coming back, this time to Spokane, for another little shtick. So I will attend that again to see, has the shtick changed at all, what things are going on, where and what, and so any new or old material on sale in the lobby kind of stuff. We'll find out what's going on that, and we will be reporting on that in due course in subsequent episodes. So, dear old Sarfatian Tay are going into the soft tissue thing in this section. And basically, it's reprising piles of CMI material. There's very few technical citations outside of themselves. In fact, just two. A 2005 paper from Schweitzer on T-Rex soft tissue, and a 2013 one on dinosaur osteocytes. Unfortunately, not open access, but a very extended abstract of it is available at Science Direct, so I'll be putting a linkage in on that. They also give a little wave to Armitage's, air quotes, Triceratops horn, which there's every reason to doubt that it's a Triceratops horn. His method is so sloppy in that old paper that he did, and for that matter, sloppy in the subsequent material that he's done. The one point that is never mentioned by Sarfatian Tay is how big the samples are. And remember, we're talking microscopic, that have to be teased out of the inside of bones by putting all sorts of chemicals on them and all that. So, you got little bits of fragments of stuff that can last quite a while if they're in a sealed environment. The work that Schweitzer has done that was indicating how this preservation would work, particularly the 2014 paper, which we'll be alluding to more next week, because they've got a chart in Sarfatian Tay that is trying to refute the criticisms of the soft tissue means everything is young argument. And it's an extremely misleading chart because they're alluding to this 2014 paper from Schweitzer, which is the main one on the role iron is playing in preservation. But they never give a citation for it, so the reader can't tell what it is. It's just Schweitzer et al. 2014. It's not in their notes. So that I find excessively peculiar, and we will have more on that next week. Now, our little part 2 here relates to a thing that Philip Bell did, going full gee whizzy poo on the miracle, or actually, watch out for wraparound spiders, a 2024 thing from Creation Magazine. And we'll be putting the whole link in on that little puppy. It's basically a gee whiz on orb spider webs. And difficulty with me having more than one computer knocking around in here. Only one technical citation in 24 years old, Harvey et al. 2000. And then some authority quoting from a Discovery Institute book, which is Intelligent Design Camp, shows you how desperate maybe CMI is getting, on how the spider silk can't possibly have evolved. It's not open access complete, but an excerpt of it of Eric Kessel 2021 is available at Evolution News, and I'll be putting up that link so that you'll be able to poke around with that little puppy as well. Kessel's argument rested very, very heavily on a summary piece from 2017 by Elizabeth Panisi, and that too is open access, so I'll be putting a link to that on, who had actually brought up quite a few technical papers on the issue, of which, surprise, surprise, Kessel cited none of them, such as Garrison et al. 2016, which I'll be putting a link up to. Now, 20 years ago, researchers were thinking that spider silk was basically a single origin story with a relatively constrained set of genes. But that proved to be an illusion, as convergence was rampant when it turned out they were looking into it. So we'll bring you up to speed on the actual technical papers. Ongoing research includes Franzen et al. 2023, and then there's Pedro Mariano Martins et al. 2020 that does a nice job of reviewing the current understanding of spider silk and the spinnerets. You can compare then the 2024 Philip Bell secondary troping of the Discovery Institute to the actual technical literature that was available had he bothered to do something other than trawling the Discovery Institute. Yikes. Good heavens. Can't anybody figure out how to do Google searching? I don't know. Now, so our little nagnap is this Triassic diapsid. For those familiar with the exciting world of where the hell did birds come from and the Alan Fiducia, Fred Hoyle, a bird evolution guy, his trope for years, and he kind of sticks to it, although it's getting harder and harder for him to deal with it, is that some unspecified Triassic critter, such as Longoscopima, if you wanted to get open on it, might have been the precursor for feathers. Well, this is particularly amusing. It's an open access paper. It's really fun. Hans-Dieter Seuss and quite a few others are involved as co-authors because there's got fun little, they've got new fossils that's on them. You can actually see the skin appendages that are on these funky little things. It's got the little spine spikes. And so the meat of this little phylogeny here that breaks things down chronologically. Up at the top is our little pal Longosquama, and then the one they're studying, which is this Mirasaura, which is a little bit earlier from just the mid-Triassic, whereas Longosquama is just a little bit later. The funky part is that by this phylogeny, you can't get farther away from birds, which is way down at the bottom of the chart, next to the dinosaurs, the theropods, Crocodilomorpha, and then birds off to the side, than this analysis. So I thought it was particularly interesting to see how the phylogeny material has not got anywhere close to rescuing poor Alan Fiducia's non-dinosaur model for bird origins, non-archosaur origin for bird origins, if you want to be more general about it. Now, what's going to be interesting is to see who's going to chit-chat about this. Is it going to show up? And it's got to show up. Anything that gets that prominent, and open access in particular, it is unbelievable to think that some of the pundits at the Discovery Institute and AIG and ICR and CMI will at some point riff off of this thing, if only to dump on it. So that allows everybody that wants to follow the issue to be prepped for it and to see who brings it up and who doesn't. If it turns out that they kind of let this slide and they don't really deal with it, that'll be rather intriguing. But it would seem peculiar for them not to bring that aspect up. Woo! Have a little bit of my iced tea here in our continuing to be swelter, Spokane, Washington. Um, Continuing to do the cosmology chapter, um, filling in more material. The structure that I've been landing on now is that I have a nice section on the formation of our solar system, which basically then is going to start picking off the whole issue of planetary origins and the revolution that's taken place in planetary origins view in the last 20 years in particular, relating to the notion that gas giants can shuffle around early in the solar system's history. And so Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune are all not materializing at the same time. And the order in which they're appearing has tremendous impact of what's going on in the bumpy inner thing inside the ice line of things that don't form gas giants. And that material is, just for all practical purposes, the more recent technical literature is just basically ignored by the creationist community. At some point, some of them may tiptoe into it. We'll find out. But so far, Danny Faulkner and Jason Lyle and others really haven't delved into it. Their treatments on the subject at AIG, CMI, etc., are often a decade or more old, and the material in question, the stuff that gets in the Answers research book, for example, the latest one, no sources, nothing. It's just repeating mantras. So they're farther and farther behind the curve on this. And given how quickly research is progressing, just last month, new material on basically a baby snapshot of a solar system in the birthing room. The preliminary burps that are in the modeling are the very earliest stages of planetary accretion disking. Even before their star lights up, they've got a shot of this from a thing I think it's like 1,300 light years away, something like that. So this is just absolutely delightful material, and we'll see whether or not creationists pay much of an attention to it at all. Another little sidebar, I finally got around, or I'm part way through watching the 4-hour-long monstrosity that Standing for Truth did to defend, or rather listen to the defenders of Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. And it's a little minor character who I didn't even have any references on in my bibliography. So that was kind of a little funky detail. Effectively, the guy is showing how good he can copy Walt Brown apologetics, but it's funky to look at the predictions that Brown is supposedly making, some of which he's offering years after it's a dead letter. And so he's predicting a thing that was already settled, which is an amusing bit. And then other stuff that's just making offers that are just behind the curve technically. Because this fellow was offering zero technical information. Hello, Purple. I came out a little bit late today. I was getting this stuff and the computer was doing updates and all that. So I didn't get on until about close to half an hour into the hour. And then the other Funkerdoodle material then will relate to if a certain subject doesn't come up in this hydroplate thing. Because we know that good old Donnie Budinsky is definitely aware of the heat problem because he's had numerous interactions with Erica Gutzik-Gibbon on the topic. So the question is, do the hydroplate defenders bring it up? If not, does Donnie bring it up? If not, does anybody in the Q&A bring it up? And if we can go through 4 hours without the issue never arising, especially with moderator Donnie somehow not thinking that this Brown, the version that's being presented by this defender, Lauer, I think his name is that mountain ranges are literally being thrown up over the course of like an hour in the flood process. And that's even more hilariously rapid than what you find in the standard ICR vagueness or what you would get from Andrew Snelling. So this one is just a real corker because the heat problem, the faster you do a process, the more that energy is being compressed into a small amount of time. And the fact that they would need to do calculations on this, and the fact that the creationists who do calculations on this come up with numbers that melt the earth. And so Humphreys and others are basically going, well, there was a miracle that stopped that somehow, which is the instantaneous resolution for all the stuff. But that's like, saying that the Civil War was actually fought by space aliens using lasers, but miracles hid all of that from us. Okay, if you like, if it makes you feel better. So it'll be an interesting thing. My bile was kind of rising trying to watch through the thing. I'm only about 2 hours into the thing. And there's another pastor that's involved that's doing the other thing. They kind of are dredging the bottom of the barrel, I guess, to find people in the creationist community that are okay with hydroplate theory because it's so marginalized. These defenders were apparently grumping that no one from the non-hydroplate young Earth creationist community was going to come on and debate this with them. Well, maybe you're too fringe, even for them. It's an amusing concept to think about. Anyway, it's fun to watch all these little infightings and try to figure out what gets mentioned and what doesn't. There was a curious little daisy chain that I also hit on. They will be alluding to in Rocks too, because it bumps into Kent Hovian's clams on Mount Everest argument, which we'll be alluding to in the book. There was a screwball, conspiracy-minded nutball young Earth creationist. Only 3 space aliens in the Civil War. None of them had laser weapons. Yes, I stand corrected on that. Oh, yes. For those who like the kind of science fiction cross connection there with the Civil War, Belle Boyd, the Confederate spy, figures in paralogs of Phileas Fogg 1, both under her married name and alluded to occasionally as Miss Boyd. She gets recruited by our nefarious characters that are trying to grab Impey Barbicane's Columbiad things. It's a rip-snorting tale in the Victorian era that I do want everyone to have that, and the second book. And once we get Rocks Were There 2 out of the way, then I can dive in to finish off 3, Paralogs 3, and then prep up for the books to follow. Whee! Busy. I must confess, for a retiree, I'm busting my butt more activity now than when I was actually working in conventional crap at other people's behest. Anyway, this little screwball guy, Shane, I think his name is, popped up on Milo Rossi's Mini Minuteman bit that he's just a grifter selling or hawking dietary supplements and crap, but also purveying just absolute nonsense, young Earth creationists, science denialism, conspiracy thinking, all the way up and down the yin yang. And Rossi's going to actually be doing a multiple series on the thing, a deep dive into it. And so he hit the young Earth creationist end of it this time. And what this guy often does is just crib bliplets from other people that then he treats as though they're kind of real and then puts the commercial in. Difference of the time is you get to choose what you work on. That is exactly so. I could say that the first 60 some odd years of my life was a preparation for the gear shift that took place around 2016 when I did Paralogs, and then Rocks Were There, Evolution Slam Dunk, and Rocks Were There, and videos and all the other stuff that keep me busy as all get out. In fact, a little sidebar thing, I've been tinkering with my Politique Party War game that I want to get the corrections up. Dapper Dino and a few other people have played the early version of it when we were down in the Grand Canyon a couple of years back. I finally got all the game cards worked out, and I've got my little prototype board structured up, and I'm going to get seriously back into getting local gamers to do play testing on the thing to see whether or not the modifications in the rules that I'm thinking jack it up to a new level, in the same way that changing the queen and bishop move in old Shatranj chess turned it into the kicker queen's chess that is the standard Western chess form today. we'll find, the only way to find out is to have some play testing and that on it. So I had to do up because I added on an extra set of 60 game cards and restructured a lot of stuff that I couldn't have done easily years ago. All of my cards for the old version of the game were hand drawn. I had to buy blank cards from US game systems and then manually draw all the crap and all that in. Here I can print them up on cardstock on my printer, and so I can have little dice roll information on each card in the way that you would have on Cards Against Humanity kinds of construct that way. Although the cardstock I'm using is not quite as thick as standard cardstock, but it'll be good enough for playtesting. Anyway, so this Shane idiot, one of the little things that he was blipping off of were the clams on Mount Everest argument, and literally cribbing Kent Hovind. So because Hovind and the various people that repeat this nonsense get an illusion in an info box in Rocks 2, bing, there it goes. And so you get these little new people that are on the block, that are on Instagram and a lot of these other contexts. I don't follow any of that stuff. But fortunately, people like Apologia and Milo Rossi and all that, the younger folk, keep their finger on the pulse of the craziness. And since I'm following them, I can build off of that and plug that material into our remarkably detailed compendium for Rocks the Vera Volume 2. So anyway, that should be a beautiful amount of material for everybody to digest. Next week, of course, will be another Luskin show as we continue to plow through the most boring list of the vast majority of the stuff. I think is probably going to continue to be what we've already encountered, which are technical papers. Playing cards are standard cardstock, but they are then plastic coated. Yeah. Well, and again, it depends on the size. I was using and continue to use the bridge size deck, which is a little smaller than a standard poker deck. And then there's a company that makes a variety of game components. They make boxes, blank boards. They'll print the material up. They'll do a whole bunch of stuff, but that takes more capital than I have at the moment. But at the very least, they also make a variety of game card types. So they make round game cards and square ones and hexagonal ones and various playing card sizes and all this kind of stuff. So that allowed me to customize the game cards in a way that I never had done on the original set. So I'm using square cards for the situation ones, hexagonal ones for these little territories that are like Monopoly title deeds in the thing. And then I can use the bridge kind cards for the influence and power cards that shuffle together as a single pack that functions in the way the things are going. So it was a sort of thing that was laborious to go through and print these things up and calibrate the image so that I can print the back side of it and then put the paper in backwards and print the front side on it and cut the cards out manually and all of that. But you can still come up with a perfectly workable little card that functions as a test bed, not as fancy schmancy as something that would be professionally printed, but at the very least gets us a ballpark to see whether or not I need to adjust anything on any, change the titling of anything, and whether is the font size workable or not. It looks all quite readable to play around with, and everything fits on my board. I'm play testing to find out how much volume. I'll be able to do the rules, curiously enough, via the same people that I do my books on. It suddenly dawned on me all I needed to do was to do that size of booklet, and I can copyright the rules through Amazon. That'll be very, very perfect. So it's been there, done that. Yeah, that's well, the old Politique game that I'd come up with has a genesis going back, yikes, into the 1960s when some friends of mine and I concocted a super risk game where we wanted more territory and we wanted to go have ships so that you would take armies across the sea. And it was knee deep at the time. We were reading like Lord of the Rings. So there's a whole bunch of Mordor and these various terminologies that's popping up in the territory that we added on. And then me and my friends were starting to bump into the Avalon Hill war games at the time, the things with hex grids and dice tables and little teeny zillion little die cut army units that have attack factors and defense factors and movement factors and all that. that are meticulous to this day, meticulously detailed military simulators that have beautiful documentation about why the armies are what they are and the logistics of things and the historical background. So from that point of view, they were just delightful. But they're ridiculously complicated to set up. And even if there are electronic versions of some of these things, they're tactical games. They're not strategic ones. So some attempts to design by me a Avalon Hill style war game that would have rivers and mountain ranges and all the kind of topographical features that were typical in Avalon Hill style games with little teeny small hexagons. I took one look at the design I came up with and I hated it. And so I went in the opposite direction to create a party war game that would have a limited number of hexagons, 60, which is divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 players. And so it's easily and logical and all that stuff. That's big enough that you have like this miniature world, and yet small enough that there are relatively a small number of components, and you will use money to pay for your armies. And so there's an economic element to it. And I wanted to have a party game that didn't have the failures of Risk or Monopoly that can seesaw back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to the point of where clear the table, we need to have dinner. Always a problem. So you can stop the game at any point. People can come in before it's over, leave before it's over, and variety. And you can play theoretically with as many as 60 people in the multiplayer format, of which I have only been able to test just little fragments with the old version of the game for like 8 or 10 people. Yeah, Avalon Hill games, I still have a bunch of them downstairs. The very first one that I ever got was 1914, because I was a really big, and still am, fascinated by that period. It was a thing that I'd studied a great deal, even in high school. We had special honors courses and stuff that were dealing with World War I and World War II. Professor Chatton, my high school history teacher, absolutely a delightful, witty person who gave me the life advice that after 3 daiquiris, what heat? And so very influential in my thinking. But those games also are highly tactical. And the same thing for, like, if you play Axis and Allies, that was one of the games we played when our bunch went down to the Grand Canyon, that it took a while to set up. And it is basically the Allies invading Normandy versus the Germans trying to prevent them from victory. So it's a tactical game, meticulously realistic in many ways, but it's not a strategic game. I wanted a game that had internal structures that are so formatted that you have to figure out what you need to do to become the richest player on the board, and which is the goal of the game, not conquering territory, whatever. How you go about doing that, whether you consolidate your country, whether you prevent somebody else from doing that, it depends on the amount of influence cards that you've had and what situations have occurred. There can be earthquakes and famines and a whole bunch of stuff that can vicissitudes along the way. And so there's an open-endedness to it, and you can make alliances that you never break. You don't have to fire any shots. You can trade territory. There's a whole bunch of features that I don't think any other game really has. Played a lot of Victory in the Pacific, which is a strategic naval game. Yeah, there's tons of them. I have that, a Jutland. I have Stalingrad, Gettysburg, which was an oddity. That's one of the really old ones because it has square units rather than hexagonal grid. That came along later, and there were an absolute proliferation of them in the 70s, and that was some of which were better than others. Some of them had clumsily written rules that you had instantly encounter. There was a Korean War game that I was immediately finding spots where it was unclear rules as to what the hell was supposed to go on with it. That was bungling. So I wanted a game that you could play half drunk that would be so incredibly simple in terms of its logistics that most of the activity is see the small number of components that are physically on the board, and then you're conducting diplomacy amongst the various players to see what kind of little alliances and skullduggery you can plot out to get where you want to go to get one step up. And we'll start doing, once I have a couple copies of the game that I can use to be able to do play testing. There's Uncle's Bookstore or Game Store downtown. I know they have people coming in to play war games there on a regular basis. Eventually, I would want to be able to take a working prototype over to, there's a big game convention that happens every year over in Tacoma. I'd want to be able to show that. But theoretically, if I can get kind of scuttlebutt as to people who have played the game and go, oh my God, I got to have this game. We'll see what happens. Or they can be bored silly by it and find out that that it's not the greatest game in the world. But I think it's really fun and ingenious. So it was a matter of making adjustments to the way the board was structured. Oh, that was another detail, is that I enlarged the board, because the old Avalon Hill blank boards that I was getting way back in the day, I could only make a board that was 24 by 22 wide. So I had to cut down on the number of squares that I had on the thing to keep the squares, hexes the same size. This newer company that I've encountered, they make a 24 by 24 board. So that meant I could increase the size of stuff and put little card spots and stuff on it, put some seat hexes back in that I'd had to trim out. So we had a lot of little modifications on the fun and games on it. So it's an interesting little tidbit. It wanted something that was extremely simple graphic structure that you could play half drunk. It meant that I had to create all these little new game cards and print them up in such a way that they'd be workable. Well, anyway, I have digressed. So everybody say, super duper say, oh, let me get my thanks everybody for sticking with the old Gipper here on the exciting world of Patreon. That I'm well aware of the fact that we are going to be getting into increasingly dicey finances in this world. So thanks everybody that's colleagues, researchers, assistant researchers, friends, legacy patrons who have stuck with me all of this time. I've noticed that like Office Depot is closing shop here in Spokane. I guess it's going bankrupt generally. I think they kind of semi-merged with Staples. So Staples will be continuing. But if you want to get crap now, you have even less choices to do in terms of access of things. I've called attention to some of the stores and things that where I've noticed that they've cut back on like the hours that they're open. And often places that in years gone by were very busy at virtually any time of day now are way fewer people shopping there. These are all troubling indicators that the economy is running out of steam. And that's even before you start getting the tariff mess that nincompoop Trump is gangbusters ramming into play. And circumspect analysts are thinking definitely this is going to have some inflationary bit. I think it's going to be much worse than that. Plus, when we have the impact of lack of tourism from foreign countries, people not wanting to come here for that, people not wanting to invest here, people discovering that throwing out so many undocumented workers who shouldn't have been thrown out means that you don't have people to build things and pick crops and add extra money into the economy and be productive. We've had these expulsions before. We curtailed immigration in the 20s. Did that keep us from having the Great Depression? No. We had expulsions in the early 1930s once the Depression started under Hoover. Did that stop the Depression? No. We had some expulsions in the 1950s under Eisenhower. Did that prevent the recession at the end of his term? No. Are we getting a pattern here? Is it possible? Missed 24-hour grocery stores? Yeah, well, there again, it's a dynamic of market costs and the like. If we resume a full-out price prosperity based upon reform of the economy that are based on some progressive reforms, of which a lot needs to be done, and we're way overdue on, there's a good chance that a kick in the balls in the way of a depression will spur that. It's probably no coincidence that the big progressive era that took over big sections of both Democrats and Republicans in the early 20th century was hot on the heels of the big Great Depression of the 1890s. And likewise, the big New Deal era was generated as a result of the Republican Hoover 29-30 depression. So not happily go lucky to see things happen in that direction. Although this does mean that we get to see a living experiment. How media will be dealing with this, how will advertising change, Will commercials that were sounding perfectly fine before the economy falls apart now have to be completely retooled because it doesn't work out well? Trump presumably will be building his golden giant ballroom there next to the White House at right in the middle of the Depression. And so that's going to be really great optics. And we'll be seeing how smiley face all of the nitwits are in the Republican Party as a lot of shit hits a lot of fans. Am I an inaccurate Cassandra on this point? Well, in a year or two, we're going to know one way or the other, aren't we? So anyway, might be the economy, but I think 3 craft stores going out of business is the drop in demand since Sloth Girl died. Yes, yes, yeah. Well, there's one to look out for, and these are some companies that have been dicey, even in generally good times. Best Buy is teetering on the edge of disaster, and they may go out completely. You'll really see some murkiness if companies that operate on really tight margins and mass volume purchases, Walmart being an example, whether they will be closing some of their stores within a metropolitan area and other areas entirely. So there'll be a lot of little measuring sticks that you can use to see where the economy is going and see the bellwether of it. I would recommend that people be very careful about taking on debt load, on expenditures and the like, because interest rates are not likely to go up if inflation is not or go down if inflation is not curbed, and likewise if they do go down because you're trying to stave off bad economic times. How far down can you go? We're not that much above zero interest rates at the Fed, so you might find that won't matter what the Fed does, that banks and stuff will be putting up high interest rates anyway. And the housing sector is an area that needs really fundamental reform because we don't really have functionally affordable housing. Healthcare is still a dangling loose end. And of course, we have to pick up all the pieces from all of the chaos being generated by the Trump Doge nincompoops. As a general rule, having the most incompetent Fox, Trump Pravda news media brand of cabinet in the history of the Republic, and a pile of greedy billionaires who are no more in touch with working people than they are with transfinite mathematics or particle physics, have no role governing the country, especially if their purpose is to carry out the policies of somebody who managed to bankrupt gambling casinos. What can I say except don't blame me, I voted for Harris. So let me put up my rocks for their advert. Come. There we go. And again, thank you, dear Peter, who is such a graphics wonder and does this all gratis. Folks like me cannot afford to do anything, but he appreciates our work. He also does all of the neat little video bits for Jackson and his channel. He has a variety of things that's done for various formats of material. And I'm assuming we will get a fresh commercial once we get rocks for there too, which we are all running amok on. It's a massive amount of work to pull all of these pieces together, but there are no points which we will not be immensely proud of. And it will be a further adjunct in kicking off the various elements that are alluded to as kind of like preface in Rocks 1 and then picked up fully in Rocks 2. All of the legendary material, all of the stuff on living dinosaurs, and of course all the cosmology material, human evolution, paleo worlds, biogeography. There's a whole pile of issues that we alluded to kind of peripherally in number 1, and it's really kicking in number 2. And so it's going to be just a delight. Not the Democrats are doing much better. Well, the Democrats have a long historic problem for the last bit. some people would be screaming bloody murder that the Democrats are too woke and too progressive and that. Sorry, I think they're actually not progressive enough. And have blocks, some of who are retiring, your Senator Manchin type, Sinema, who used to be a Democrat and then flipped over to the Trumpista side, who were dragging back any attempts to do progressive reforms. So it was a sign of the weakness of the whole political system that Obama could not get the Bush tax cuts on the rich pulled back, and Biden, again, also couldn't get those tax cuts pulled back. There weren't enough support within the Democratic cadre, plus the foot dragging of the Republicans to eliminate it. So the dumb 37% Trump tax cut level for people at the top, that's continued on over. They amusedly, the Trumpistas try to argue, oh, they've got this big tax cut for people. Not really. It's just a continuation of the 2017 tax bill. There's a few minor tweaks around the edges, but basically it's just status quo, which means deficit producers. The one time within my modern lifespan that we had budget surpluses was under Clinton, when we pushed the top rate up to 42%. And it wasn't even Clinton's idea to be so adamant about that. Dick Gebhardt, who was somebody I was not a great admirer of at the time, but he was Speaker of the House, and he basically put Clinton's feet to the fire, saying we've got to start doing something about both budget deficits that under Bush 1 were eating up. They were becoming one of the biggest ticket items in the budget, which is starting to be the same way now. Because of all of these continuing budget deficits, trillion-dollar size ones that the Trump administration has been ratcheting up, and even try to reduce the national debt, which was absurdly low compared to what it is now. But the idea that Trumpistas have, and Trump, of course, blathers on this, that somehow or other the economy is going to grow so rapidly that tax revenues will actually pay for these tax cuts, is a fantasy. And we have not one, not two, but three examples from the Reagan years and then the Bush years and the Trump years to know empirically that isn't true. It doesn't work, hasn't worked, and won't work. How many times do you have to bang your head with a frying pan before it dawns on you that hitting your head with a frying pan is not a good idea? Well, maybe we're going to have some big frying pans hit people in a really big economic blob, because it's been 80 years since we left the Great Depression, and you have way too many people, plus way too many people. So here's my little hobby horse. Way too many people who have such bad source methods that they are so disconnected from publicly available and easily accessible facts that they live in a fantasy bubble and end up voting for people who are actually outside of their own interest. So they're going to have to really discover the horrifying consequences of having that level of incompetence in governance, and we got to change our ways. So there's the whole effing Megillah in that front. Everybody that's in hot zones, there's storms along the East Coast as usual, terrible fires in California, Arizona, the Grand Canyon's burning, the North Rim, I think. Plus big Canadian fires. I think we were smelling some of that stuff here in Spokane. I don't think there were any local fires in that. So this is stuff blowing in. Plus it's coming in to the point where Chicago is looking gloomy because of all the soot coming in from these fires in various areas. Welcome to the 21st century, kids. We tried to warn you this was going to happen way back in the 1980s, but afraid you didn't listen. So time for recalibration. So everybody stay safe. Hunker down, work through the summer, and let's get out our Schadenfreude popcorn available so that we can take assessment as to what happens when things start hitting speed bumps. And speed bumps there shall be. So, till next week, and when we will have another Casey Luskin Fest,